But yeah, it surprises me that only the third one got through. What just happened? Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with a look at some of my 5-star reads. So this is not an original idea. This is actually a video that I saw Gavin from Gavin Reads It All, I think is what his channel name is now, a couple of years ago. So I will leave the video linked down below if you are curious to see that. But he basically went through a bunch of his 5-star reads to see if he lied and if they were still like 5 stars, favorites and stuff. So I decided let's do something similar. I have my computer in front of me. I've pulled up Goodreads and I have all the books that I've read categorized by star rating. So I've got all my 5 stars at the top. There was literally no rhyme or reason to when these like pop up. I was hoping that the oldest ones would come up first, but I can't quite figure out how to do that. So with that being said, I'm just going to go through the list here and talk about some of the books that are 5-star reads. There's a lot on here, so we're not going to go through all of them. We're just going to go through a few of them and see if they are still 5-star reads, because it's been a while since I read them, or I've changed my rating system in my brain a little bit, whatever the reason. It's been a little bit of time, so I thought it would be fun to kind of go through and just see if I would consider them 5-star reads now. I might skip over some that I've done recently just because I know that they're not going to change. So starting off, we have Dreamland, and this is by Sarah Dessen. I read this, oh my gosh, I was in high school when I read this. So it's been over 10 years now since I read this book. And at the time, it was the very first kind of harder hitting topic kind of story that I'd ever read before. I never read a Sarah Dessen. I think I've read 2 Sarah Dessen books at this point, but I'd never read a Sarah Dessen book before, and this was the first one, and it revolves around an abusive relationship. So not the happiest of topics. And I'm not sure I would give it 5 stars today. I think maybe it would be closer to a 4-star, just because at the time it took me heart and soul. And I think that there are books out there that are probably a little bit better. This one, I don't even know when this one came out, but it had been a little bit of time since I've read this one. And I still think very fondly of it, as much as you can when it's a book that's not the happiest of topics. So I don't know. I don't think this would be a 5-star anymore, just because I don't think I've read things that have harder topics in it. My reading tastes have changed 1,000 different things, but I think very fondly of this, and like I wouldn't change the rating, obviously, because high school Kelsey thought this was great and it really impacted her, and that's probably why she rated it so high. Another one is 1984. This is another high school one that I read by George Orwell. I read this. This was one of the required readings for one of my lit classes. I want to say this was freshman year in high school when I read 1984. I'd never really read a sci-fi book before. I'd never read anything like this. I was not really into classics quite yet. I was still discovering things about me. But 1984 was the first book that one of the first books that I read in high school, and I was a big fan of actually a lot of the required readings for school. There was very few books. There were some. There was quite a handful of books that I really didn't like. Like, I was not a fan of David Copperfield. I was not a fan of, there was this book I read called The Power of One, I think, and it was about like boxing. There was The Catcher in the Rye I wasn't a fan of. So there was a couple of books that I didn't like, but overall I enjoyed a lot of the books that I read, and this was just one of them. It was my, like I said, my first step. I don't know what it was about the writing or the world building. If it was my first kind of step into that sci-fi world where they kind of thought very politically about our current world and talked a lot about it. This has to do with, you know, a big brother comes from this book, and people being spied on by the government and things of that nature. So it definitely would probably hit different. I'm curious to see. I would like to reread this at some point, just because I do have it on my shelves over there somewhere. And I really remember enjoying the time, because it was very action-packed for a story that had a lot of political messaging to give the reader. But I don't think I would change the rating on this one either. I think this one would still be a 5-star, just because I have that nostalgia attached to it, and I think it's a good book. I do. This is just turning into all the books I read in high school, because we have The Great Gatsby next, by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This one got 5 stars. Another classic, another book that I read for school and really enjoyed. I'm not sure I would give it 5 stars now, just because I remember the writing being really hard to get into, but I really liked the story of Great Gatsby. But at the same time, I've read quite a few retellings and seen quite a few adaptations. So the story of Great Gatsby is pretty close to the forefront of my brain, and it just is not my favorite story in the world. It's a good story. It's one that I can dive into, but the writing's rough. The character of Daisy always drove me nuts. So I think there would be elements of it that I wouldn't enjoy. So I think it would, if I read it now, I think I would give it a 4-star, because it would still be pretty high up there as far as books that I enjoyed, but I would not probably give it 5 stars today. What's next? Okay, we've got Night by Elie Wiesel, which is actually a book that I reread a couple of years ago, but I originally read it in this is 2018, but I'm thinking that's when I started Goodreads, because this was definitely a high school story, or a book that I read in high school. This one, I think I would still keep it at 5 stars, just because the story is rough, but it's really important. It's short, so it's easy to get through. The writing is very easily accessible. As far as, I would consider this one a classic, so as far as classics go, this one is probably relatively easily accessible. And also, I read it recently, within the last couple of years, and it's still got 5 stars. I still enjoyed my time reading it. I have the other 2. I think they're downstairs. I have the other 2 in the series. This author wrote a trilogy of books, so I don't remember what the other 2 are about. And I don't remember, because this one's nonfiction, so I don't remember if the other 2 are nonfiction or not, but I have them, and they're all short, and I just really enjoyed the writing of the story, and I think that's where he has a very lyrical is maybe not the right word. He just has a very captivating way of telling the story that is absolutely horrific, but is an important story that needs to be told, and it's told in a very accessible way. We've got, we have The End, which is the last book in the series Unfortunate Events, which I read in 2020. That was the year that I reread this entire series with my friend Serena. And this one got 5 stars. I think I would still give it 5 stars, because I may not be in love with a lot of elements of this series. It's very repetitive, especially with 13 books, and you've got the same kind of narration style, which is tough to get through sometimes, but the ending was such a powerful ending. I still remember it. So I still think I would give this one 5 stars, maybe 4 if I read it now, but again, this was a reread from when I read it. Oh gosh, when I was probably in middle school was when I read the series for the first time. Middle to probably early high school is probably when I finished the series. So yeah, I would definitely probably not change that one. We have The House of the Scorpion. This is by Nancy Farmer. I bet you have got this book downstairs somewhere. This one was a book that I read. I was in 7th grade when I read this book. I remember vividly because my science teacher in middle school was very into reading and started a book club during lunch on Fridays. And so we would pick a book, and read a certain selection of it, or we'd have times where we would vote on books and things of that nature, and then the parents, obviously, when we voted on a book, the parents got a say in whether or not it was appropriate or not. And I remember a lot of the books that I got from that book club. That's where I read Twilight for the first time, and so this is one that we read in that book club. I was really good at getting the books and not actually reading them at the correct speed as everyone else, but I would still read them. It would just be like I would read them that summer or it had been like a few months since we'd read it. But I remember really liking this one. I'm not sure I would enjoy it as much to this day just because it's about cloning, and I believe there's drugs involved in some way, and I have this suspicious feeling that it would not be as enjoyable and it would be very stressful. But I just remember being sucked in by the story and the characters, and it was, like I said, it was in 7th grade, and I remember learning about like the dolly, the cloned sheep, and things like that. So it was very like at the forefront of my brain when I read it. So it was the correct time, I think, to read it. But I'm sure there was some other stuff that I didn't pick up on because I was too young. And I just remember there being a really big twist at the end that I didn't see coming. And I'm wondering if I had read it now, if I would have picked up on it a little bit sooner. So I'm not sure this one would get the full 5-star, but I still think I would enjoy it. The next one is The Weston Game by Ellen Raskin. This is a mystery story that it's real short, and I remember making everyone read it. I still have it. It's in the mystery section somewhere. But I think I would still give this one 5 stars. It follows this guy. It's Weston, I believe is his last name. And he ends up dying, and in his will, he kind of creates this game. And so whoever can solve the riddle wins his fortune. And he lives in this house or this like apartment building or something, and he's like was in the penthouse. And so everyone in this building is someone that he has brought in to possibly solve his mystery. And I think it's in 3rd person. I don't think we follow one person specifically, but I just remember like going through and like pinpointing everything. It was very like sleuthy, and I really enjoy things like that. And it's not like it's not super dark when it comes to like some of these thrillers out there that get kind of dark. And I think I picked this one up super randomly and read it in like a summer. Like it's super short, so I probably got through it in like a week or 2, but I just remember like being engrossed by the mystery elements of this. So because of that, I still think I would give this 5 stars. Okay, the next one I know for a fact I would still give 5 stars, and that is The Eyre. This is the first in the Reed family series by Joanna Lindsey. This is the very first historical romance book, specifically mass market, but I think just in general, first historical romance book I ever read. It was relatively early on. Like I said, I really want to say I was in college when I read this book, or like end of high school, early college age. And I picked this one up at like a yard sale or something for 25 cents. I don't know what it was, but it had that Regency vibe. I had just discovered like Jane Austen. So I was really into finding other books that fit that Regency vibe. And this one did. And so I picked it up, and I didn't know what I was getting into. And I don't remember the story specifically, but I remember, the main male character is Scottish. And I remember the way she wrote it, because I didn't have an audiobook. I hadn't really discovered audiobooks yet at that point. And so I remember the way she wrote this. I still have it. My copy is down there. I can see it. She wrote this dialect in her dialogue so that when you read it, you had a Scottish accent in your head and you could not do it. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the way that she wrote it was fantastic. And it was like this girl who was considered, I think at the time, I don't think we would consider it present day, but at the time she was considered like plus size, and she was very interested in this new like lord that came from Scotland, but he was set to marry like one of her friends. They're not really friends, but they were like acquaintances through society and stuff. And then he fell for her and she fell for him, but they couldn't be together for one reason or another, and it's their story. And I just really enjoy their character. Like I'm still like, I'm smiling when I'm thinking about it. So yeah, the story has got a lot of nostalgia for me just because I enjoyed it so much, but I remember a lot of this story, and I do think I would still give it 5 stars to this day just because I loved it so much. The next one is The Magician's Nephew, which is the very first book in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This is the 6th book, but I know for a fact it's the first one. And I give it 5 stars, and I think I would still give it 5 stars. I'm not in love with that series. I think the writing is too detached for me to enjoy. I've picked up a few in the recent years. I still want to finish this series. I think I still have like the last like 2 or 3 books maybe in the series, but they're super short, so they're easy to get through, but they're also harder to get through in my opinion because I don't love the writing style. However, this is the very first book. It introduces some new characters. It introduces the way that Narnia was created. It introduces the wardrobe and how to get to Narnia and things of that nature. And I found the story, like I'd already known the story of the Chronicles of Narnia. Or at least the second one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I knew that one pretty well. I had to read it for school at one point. So, and I'd seen the movie. So like I really enjoyed that book, but I hadn't read the first one in the series. And so this was my way of like, it felt like a prequel almost to me when I read it, about how much I enjoyed. I don't know, it was just like, it was the way that the world got set up, and I felt like I learned a lot about how things started and began and things of that nature. I don't know. I just remember really enjoying it, and I still think to this day I would really enjoy the first one. The first one is still my favorite in the series, even though I've read a few since then, but there was something about this first one that I still think very, very highly of. Fahrenheit 451 is next. I think this one again would get 5 stars. This one is another one that I read for school, one of the required readings that I read in class. I want to say this was 8th grade, I want to say, because I remember we had 3 specific books, and this was one of them. And this was the first book about books, I think, that I had read. If I remember correctly, I might be wrong about that. But the idea of burning books like freaked me out. But the story behind this guy who was collecting books against the government's permission, and even in the like couple of years after college, I remember finding a graphic novel version of this story that I read just to kind of like remind myself of the story. I just remember really enjoying this story as a whole and getting sucked in. This was the year that I also read To Kill a Mockingbird, I want to say, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So yeah, I think this one would still get 5 stars just because it's a classic. It's very telling of its time, but it also, I think, is one that you could read at any time. It looks kind of like 1984, where it looks towards the future a little bit. So it's not one that I think it stands the test of time. That's what I was trying to say. So like, I feel like it doesn't matter what time period you're in, what's happening politically, something in this book will resonate. And I just liked our main characters and how they liked books, basically. The next one is one of the newer ones, and it's Love, Lucy by Lucille Ball. I read this in 2020. Loved it. It's her autobiography. It's one that really tells her story. I love Lucy. I love the show I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball is just someone that I find really fascinating, and so this being her story, I still remember a lot of her story. Now, this was only 3 or 4 years ago, so it was relatively recent. Has it really been that long? Wow, my brain just kind of broke there. Anyway, it's been a few years since I read it, but I do remember really enjoying it. I still think very highly of it. I remember being sucked into her story, which is harder for me to do, especially when it comes to a nonfiction, just because like I may enjoy my time, but there's always a little bit of disconnect for me usually. But this was written so well that I just really enjoyed her story. And even though it's maybe not the happiest of stories, I liked her outlook on life, and I remember a lot of the story. So I think this one would still be 5 stars for sure. So we've got Jane Eyre on here, which I gave 5 stars. I read this in 2018. This was one of the, I think this was relatively early on in my career as here on YouTube, but I don't think I would give this 5 stars now. I think I still really like the story of Jane Eyre, and I like the stories like where people retell the story of Jane Eyre. I'm very interested in those. I think it's a very interesting plot. The writing was incredibly tough to get through. It makes me not want to read anything by the Bronte sisters, honestly, because it was a lot. Like, I would find myself, I listened to this on audiobook because it was just such a thick book. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get through it. And I remember that there would be times where I would space out while she was lamenting about the weather or something. And I would space out for a very long time, and I would come back and she would still be talking about the same thing. And I was like, what are we doing here? So it was, yeah, this one I don't think would get 5 stars. I think the plot gets 5 stars, so I think it would probably scrape in at like a 3.5, maybe a 4 star, just because I liked the plot so much, but the writing would bring it way down. Let me readjust. I definitely kicked my camera here, so hopefully it doesn't look ridiculous. Ooh, The Host. That's an interesting one. This one is by Stephenie Meyer. Is it actually part of a series? Sorry. This one was one of the books, was I think the first book that Stephenie Meyer, oh, it says it's part of a series, but there's literally only one book. That's bizarre. This was the first book I think Stephenie Meyer wrote after Twilight, and I will admit that I was Twilight girly definitely in high school. I think my love for the series has dipped. I think I'll still think very fondly of it. I still have all of my books. Like, I'm not getting rid of them anytime soon. I still think very fondly of my time reading it. I don't think it's the best thing in the world, but I still think very highly of it. So I was very curious about this, and I just never got around to it. And then they made a movie of it, and I really enjoyed the movie. So I remember very vividly, my college library had just a handful of nonfiction, or a handful of fiction books, because obviously it was a college library, so it's going to be focused on all of the nonfiction things that you need for your studies. But there was a section upstairs that had a bunch of fiction books, and this was in it. And I remember checking it out, and I took a bus home for like Thanksgiving or something, and I remember reading this book on the bus home and being incredibly enthralled. So I'm not sure it would get a full 5 star from me today, but I still think it would get pretty high, like a 4 or 4.5, just because I think the idea of this world and this like sci-fi elements that she has included in this story are fascinating, super creepy. Like, there's definitely some creepy elements to it, because it's very like, they're kind of like parasites almost. And so that element is kind of creepy. But the story itself is very, very interesting. And I was swept in by the romance elements of it. I was swept in by a lot of things. I was swept in by her writing, which I didn't think I would get swept up with. There was just a lot to this that I really enjoyed, and I think she had a very captivating story to tell, and it was super thick. I think I own this book. I think it's downstairs as well. But yeah, I think this one, if I reread it, I'm not sure if it would get a full 5 star, but I don't think I would ever change it just because I have a lot of nostalgia attached to this story. Okay, the next one I'm seeing is Ink Death, which is the 3rd book in the Ink Heart series. So I'm just going to talk about all 3 of them together. The 3rd one got 3 stars. I'm double checking to see what the rest that what I gave them. I think I gave the first 2 4 stars and the 3rd one 5 stars. But I loved this series. I still have all 3 of them downstairs. I would love to reread this series at some point. It's about a guy who has a magical, it's about his daughter, but it's about this guy who has a magical ability to, when he reads out loud, things from the books that he reads show up in our world. But because of that, there's a trade-off, and something from our world goes into the books. And so at the beginning of the book, or like a long time ago, he was reading to his wife and accidentally brought some characters from this really not so great world into our world, and then his wife went into the books. And so it follows him and his daughter just trying to survive, and then these characters who have been stuck in our world forever, coming after him for help because they want certain things. And so I loved the story. I thought it was very fascinating. I don't remember why I gave the 3rd one 3 stars, or the 3rd one 5 stars, whereas I gave the other 2 4. But this entire series is like one of those that like it's going to be in my brain forever. I think I started this when I was in middle school and ended it when I was in high school. I think it was one of those series. It's only 3 books, but they're really thick books, and I remember taking a long time to get through them. But I just remember adoring this series, and I don't think I would change them. I think that maybe the first 2 might get higher ratings when I reread them, just because I have nostalgia attached to them. It surprises me that only the 3rd one got 5 stars, just because of how fondly I think about the series. But yeah, that's a good one. That's a good series. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend. Interesting. Okay, so the next one is Where She Went, which is part of the If I Stay series by Gail Forman. I think I'm double checking. It's the second in this duology. I got If I Stay as a graduation present from high school. I gave that one 4 stars, and I gave the second book 5 stars. Fascinating. I don't think I would give this one 5 stars. I remember my time reading this, and I feel like it was a 3-star read. I don't know why I gave it 5 stars. But it's like the first one is this girl who gets in a car accident and her family passes away due to the accident. So it's just her who survived, and it's kind of an out-of-body experience. She's watching herself in the hospital, and she's deciding whether or not, quite literally, to stay with her grandparents and her boyfriend or to kind of pass on with her family. And it's her, like I said, out of body, kind of watching what's happening in the hospital while she makes this decision. And then the second book follows what happens after the decision, and I just felt like there didn't need to be a second book, but I still read it, and clearly I liked it, but I don't think it's a 5-star anymore. I think this one's definitely one of the ones that would get bumped kind of way down. One more. Okay, I've talked about 14 books. Let's find one more book to talk about. Let's see. There's a lot here that I've read recently that I know my opinions would not change on, so I'm trying to like skip over those. The Night Circus. That's an interesting one. So The Night Circus, super popular by Erin Morgenstern. I have my copy over there. I still haven't read her second book because I gave 5 stars when I read it. I think I read this, I remember the summer I read this, because it was like over the course of summer. I remember reading it. My family would go to a mountain house every summer. My mom's side would, and this was, my dad bought this book for my mom, I think is what it was, but I ended up reading it first, I believe. And I remember reading it there and really enjoying it and kind of being like sucked into the story. So I was definitely in high school when this happened. But I feel like she's a very whimsical storyteller and like writer, and I'm not sure if that writing style would click with me anymore, which is why I haven't read her second book, because I'm a little terrified to pick it up, I'm not gonna lie. Just because I'm afraid that, you know, she had such a great start, and I loved the first one. Like, I made everyone read it. I made Lauren read it when we became roommates in college. Like, this book was one of the books that I was like, everyone needs to read this book. And I think I remember the ending, but I'm still kind of confused on what happened at the end. So it's definitely worth a reread, because I'm super curious if my opinions will have changed. Also, like, I don't remember a lot of, like, I remember the plot at the beginning, and I remember how it ends, but I don't remember any of the middle parts to get there. So I don't know. I don't know about this one. This one could still be 5 stars, or I could not click with the writing and it could be a 4-star. I don't think it would go down much, but I think it might go down a little bit. So that's what I don't know about. That's a little interesting. But that's it. I'll stop there. There's so many more on this list. I could keep going forever, but I wanted to pick some that were from my earlier years of reading. So that's why there were so many classics and so many things I read for school. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you'd like another kind of installment of this. Like I said, there are so many on this list. I would happily continue to go through. But I think nostalgia is a very driving force when it comes to my reading, because I'm looking at this and I'm seeing like a lot of these books would still be 5 stars, but it would be because of nostalgia attached to it. But there's definitely a few on here that I don't think, you know, that we talked about that I don't think would make it to 5 stars. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, or if there's a book that you know that you gave 5 stars that maybe you have changed your opinion on. I'm curious if other people are like me and have changed the way that they think when it comes to rating, and if some of the things you read a few years ago would still be 5 stars. Let me know. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you're a part of this awesome grand family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!